And we're live at Expert35. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, and as promised, bringing you experts from 35 different industries, talking about the challenges, the hardships, and the opportunities. And today we're bringing back our very, very first guest, Shalini Codispoti with Codispoti Law. Thank you so much for being back.
Thank you for having me.
Now, it's such a pleasure having you here. We are going to have a lot of fun because I remember the first time we did this, I didn't know where to look. I didn't know what to say. I don't think I even had a spiel, but you made it so much better, and it's been a pleasure just like learning about all the opportunities are in estate planning. So thank you so much for being part of that first one and now part of this new year, 2021.
Yes, thank you. I mean, we were all learning. 2020 was a year of learning.
Incredible year of learning. I think we learn more and more how important you are to the whole ecosystem, like building trust, protecting your assets, protecting your family. So again, before we get started, you can text Expert35 to the number on the screen, and you'll be able to join our conversation. We're looking for new guests for 2021 to get us through all this, because you're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but that doesn't mean it's getting easier. In fact, we're about to really understand what it means to like go through loss, whether it's a family member or a business or a transition. We're like in this metamorphosis world, and no better time than bring our OG expert, Expert20. If you want to get in touch with Shalini Codispoti, text Expert20, and you'll be able to get in touch with her. There's going to be so many nuggets of information. We're really talking about 2021 families, and I know, Shalini, give us a little bit of spiel in terms of like what you do. I love how you say like there's only a couple things in life that we can count on, and you're one of them.
Well, you know what I realized in 2020 was that the most important thing to most of us is just our family, right? And not being able to see our families and hug our families was just such a loss for us that what I do is really help families protect what matters most, which is their loved ones. If you have minor kids, it involves ensuring that you put a plan in place so that you make that process in the event of your passing or your incapacity, you make that so much easier on them. So that's really what I focus on, really putting an estate plan in place that will actually work for families and ensure that they have peace of mind knowing that their families are protected when
Oh my God, I'm going to give you a quick shout out. You've got, oh, interesting. I'm going to have to hide. Let me hide this and throw Jennifer back on there. There you go. Jennifer highly recommends you. Jennifer's also been one of our experts from Expert35. So thanks, Jennifer, for joining us live. I'm sure she's going to have some hard questions for you shortly. And today, I mean, I think we should just talk about some of the hardship that people are going to go through, right? There's going to be more loss. There's going to be more challenges. There's going to be different taxes. There's going to be, it's a whole new world. And I think one of the things we talked offline that I just really think it's really pertinent is protecting your loved ones, especially their special needs. And so,
right,
talk towards
exactly.
that.
So every family is different. Right? Some families have minor kids, so they may want to put a kids protection plan in place, which is, I see what you have up there, right? Which is really appointing short-term guardians, long-term guardians, making sure that your minor kids are protected in the event that something happens to you, prematurely. There's one thing that we cannot predict, which is when we're going to pass. So in the event that we pass when we have minor kids, we want to make sure that we put that kids protection plan in place. Now, all families, as I said, are different, right? Some families have kids who have special needs. So you really want to, look at what your family dynamic looks like to be able to plan for them. Okay, so if you do have a kid with special needs, and it could go from anywhere from a physical disability to a mental disability, right? You want to make sure that you put that trust in place, that special needs trust, to ensure that your loved ones can still get public benefits, right? Social security, whatever public assistance there is out there, but the assets that you have for them is also protected, right? You want to make sure that the assets that you leave for your kids are probably protected from future divorce, lawsuits, creditors, These are all things that we can accomplish both in us with a special needs trust as well as some lifetime asset protection trusts, right? And it's a really trust, I think, is really underutilized mechanism of estate planning that I think we should all take advantage of, right? And I just want to, jump in there and say, estate planning is not for the wealthy. Trusts are not just for the wealthy. All right, trusts are for everyone. It's just an
That's a
estate
great,
planning
you
tool.
actually probably saw Jennifer Johnson's question. She's like, hey, are estate plans for the rich only? And just speak more to that. Explain like how, attainable and why it's so important that even somebody that is of not wealth, it comes from a ton of money, protect their assets.
Right. So we're talking, yes, there are people who I think a will alone may work, right? Where they've designated who they want to leave things for, right? I tell people death either brings out the best in you or the worst in you, right? So I've seen the most close-knit families have conflicts. And so the first point of an estate plan is ensuring that there is no conflict, that your wishes are going to be honored upon your passing, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that sometimes a will alone may be good enough depending on your assets, but for the average middle class family, they own a home, they own some, they have some retirement put away, they have some life insurance, things like that, then a trust may be a better mechanism for them, right? Especially when you have kids. Within a trust, you can actually create more detailed disability provisions, right? Because we think of estate planning as only if I die. But estate planning is more than that. What if you got into a car accident and became incapacitated and you are not able to make decisions for yourself? Then who has to make those decisions? Are you leaving a huge burden on your loved ones? These are all decisions that you can make ahead of time and plan as much as you can, right?
Absolutely. Here's a really interesting question. Well, first, Greg is asking, when's the best time? Sometimes it's just not obvious when to talk to an estate planning attorney. So when are good times to revisit or initiate an estate plan?
There's no time like the present, right? Procrastination is real, right? And estate planning is one of those things, right? Well, I know I need to get that done, but I just don't have the time. Make the time. This is super important. Just as we are working every day to acquire wealth and to leave assets for our loved ones, you want to ensure that those assets that you're working so hard to acquire is protected. So, there's no time like the present. You need to get an estate plan done. You have a special needs child. You have minor kids. You may even have kids in college. You need to put a plan in place to ensure that what you leave for them is going to be protected. People think that, I have college age kids, they're going to be adults, or they probably are adults soon. I don't really need to do an estate plan for them. But the reality is, if something happens to your kids, you don't even have access to their college transcripts. Because if you don't have a power of attorney for them, you don't have access to that because they're adults. So you want to make sure that you get some documents in for your adult kids, right? Especially when they're still, living off you. You're still providing for them. You want to make sure that you have access to their medical records, that you have access to their educational records, things like that.
Here's a really interesting question coming off LinkedIn is, can you include non-family members in the trust?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A trust is really, it's yours, right? First of all, and you can leave your assets to anyone you choose, and definitely you can include non-family members in a trust. In fact, I have a lot of clients who actually elect to have non-family members as trustees of their trust, right? Someone who is not in a family, who's not going to be in the midst of all of the conflicts. So they appoint someone who's not a family member, who they know will be able to manage their trust well for them upon their passing.
Lowers the drama quite a bit.
It does. And people have no idea. Drama is very easy to find when someone passes.
Yeah, what changes do you expect in the estate planning moving forward, especially with this new administration? Do you see anything coming up?
Well, I do see. Well, right now the estate tax threshold is 11.58 million, right? So many people are not going to be subject to estate taxes because they don't own assets in excess of 11.58 million. However, that can change, right? That can change in a sitting of Congress. So we need to be able to continue monitoring, see where the laws are changing, so that we can change our plans, right? Because if you were now, let's say the new administration reduces that tax, that estate tax threshold to $3 million, then you would find that a lot more people are now going to be exposed to estate taxes, and therefore they need to meet with their attorney, discuss this, and actually come up with a plan so that they can strategize and come up with a plan to avoid those estate taxes.
Cool.
By the way, estate taxes are like 40% of your assets. Okay, just putting it out there. It's 40%.
That's so true. That is such a big chunk, and you wouldn't want to like just give it up if you don't protect it properly. Another great question is saying like, how important is planning now because of the pandemic? Like, are you seeing like a shift? And obviously, I mean, it's, you know, house pricing is changing, the interest rates are changing. I mean, there's just so many unknowns, right? How important do you see that as being like start now?
Estate planning is important regardless of if we're in a pandemic or not. But the sad reality that we're living with is that we know people who've been hospitalized. We know people who've passed away from COVID-19, right? That's a reality that we're living with, right? So we've seen the need for having an estate plan, right? People who, just this last December, a friend of mine lost her husband. He was 41. Right? No underlying health conditions. And he passed away unexpectedly with minor kids, right? That was unexpected, right? So the unexpected, and that's what estate planning is about. Planning for the worst, but hoping for the best.
Right. Well, and
we're in a
people are
pandemic.
thinking the pandemic, but we get in a car every day too, right? And that's like one of the most dangerous things we do every day. And you go into a coma or like you pass, like it's the same thing. That estate plan protects you. And it's not like insurance policies, right? Insurance policies have all these disclaimers of like, oh, if he does this or like this, right? Like they only cover you under certain circumstances. And the state is like your wish. And there's no way, I mean, I guess the only way that your estate would be implicated is if you committed some sort of a crime, right? Like then the government can go after the estate, or does it even protect you then?
Well, no, it depends. Your estate plan is your estate plan, right? Well, I guess what you're talking about is creating irrevocable trusts in the event, for a fraudulent intent, right? So, for instance, if you know that, hey, look, I'm going to be sued, so I'm going to take all of my assets and hide it into this trust. That's not going to work. That's illegal, right? You can't just anticipate that something's going to happen, take your assets and hide it into a trust. But if you're an everyday person, an everyday family, you don't anticipate something bad happening. Put your assets, sit with your attorney first of all and come up with a plan that would work for your family.
Now more than ever, we're talking about people that are taking care of their kids. There's a lot of baby boomers, or the kids are still living at home. But let's talk a little bit about special needs, right? If we want to help them be independent, like what are some ideas that you have in terms of the planning and protecting them?
So a lot of special needs kids, for instance, let's talk about autistic kids as an example, right? Some of them are highly functional, right? They can wash dishes, they can take care of themselves, they can do a lot for themselves, but they do need someone to check in on them, making sure that things are okay. And I found things like creating, building a tiny home for them on your family property where they can be monitored, but they still have their independence and they can still flourish, right? Because even people with special needs can contribute so much to our society, but we need to give them the opportunity to do it.
And something you're saying is when you create a trust, right? If something happens to you, like it doesn't have, it protects them from not avoiding those benefits. Like explain that again, because that was so interesting.
Right. So a special needs trust is an irrevocable trust, right? And you can basically, the beneficiary, who is the person, the child with special needs, is still able to benefit from, because it's not included in their assets when they're applying for public benefits, right? Because it's not owned by them, it's owned by their
Mhm.
trust, right? A trust that was created for them, so that they're still able to get social security benefits, any kind of public assistance that's available for them. But these assets are there for them in the event that they need to pay for transportation, so, for medical assistance if they need it, all of these extra things that they need. It's in that protected
And if you
trust.
put it in a will, or if you just give it to the child, you could actually disqualify them, right? Because now they have too much money, or like, right, and then they don't get those benefits.
Exactly.
That is
That is
mind
exactly.
blowing, right? Because I think that's something that I don't necessarily think about every day, and thinking like, oh, like this is actually a really interesting way to help your child be independent, give him that comfort. You're almost like that safety net, and that structure. And I think that we have so many people in this community that don't know, like, oh, what if I build them a tiny home? Is that a gift? Or, and all those things. They can work with somebody like you, right, to make sure that it's put into the trust properly. And you said something earlier, like, every time you need how do you fund a trust? What is that called? What's that process?
So when you create a trust, and I found this a lot of times, that attorneys would create a trust for a client, and they would, give them their expensive set of documents, and that's all it is. It's an expensive set of documents if it's
Mm-hmm.
not properly funded, right? So your trust is actually not going to work for you the way you anticipate if your assets are not in your trust. Funding your trust simply means taking your assets that are titled in your own name and moving it into your trust, which is titled
Mm-hmm.
into the name of your trust. That's all it is. Things like your home and your bank accounts and things like that will now be owned by your trust, and that's what we call funding your
Great
trust.
answer. Great question from Jennifer Johnson. Once done, how do family members access the final estate plan?
So what I do at my office is I have both electronic copies as well as a final binder that I give my clients. And when they get their final binder, I tell them keep it safe. But I have copies for them that I keep copies in the event that something happens with their copy, and I also give them an electronic file with their copies, right? And this brings me to another important point, right? An estate plan is only going to work if you share it with
Good point.
others. What I mean by that, Gabe, is it's great to have one, you prepare a will, you shove it in a drawer somewhere, you forget about it, no one knows it's there, we have no access to it, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not shared with anyone. And I'm not saying to go out and share any of your trust documents with any stranger, but I am saying there are certain documents that you do want to share with others. For instance, your medical power of attorney.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure that the person you've designated as your agent has a copy of that, right? So in the event of an emergency, they don't have to go, to your home, look through all of your documents, trying to find
Yeah,
that
they got to
medical
find the
power of
key to the
attorney. They have
safe.
exactly. So you want to make sure that, especially for your guardians, like you appoint short-term guardians for your
Mm-hmm.
kids, right? You want to make sure that your short-term guardians have copies of these documents, so that they can show the authorities that, hey, look, I have a copy of this document. Because guess what? Copies work in cases of emergency.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you want to make sure that your agents have copies of your documents for your plan to really work.
Right. Great question from Jennifer is, can you make changes and update it in a future date, or is it set in stone once you build it?
Absolutely not. A estate plan is not a do it once and forget it. It's not. It is an evolving thing. Ideally, I think that my client should be reviewing their estate plan at least once a year, right? Because things change, circumstances change, laws change, right? We need to be up to date with all of these things. But at the bare minimum, once every 3 years is what I would recommend that you review your estate plan. So for my clients, they get a free review of their plan every 3 years to see what changes that occurred, and make sure that their plan will work in the way that they anticipated when they first drafted it,
Right.
right?
And your life changes enough over 3 years, like interest rate changes. You may move your kids now. I mean, I can only imagine, and you have a couple kiddos, right? So, like, they
Yes.
become more like asset prone. Like, all of a sudden, you get a car, you get a house, you get a bigger house. Now you're saving for college. Now there's like that savings plan. Another thing that we talked about before that I think is just so important. What about mixed families? Like, if what are important things and to consider when you're doing an estate?
So I'm in a blended
Mm-hmm.
family myself, Gabriel, right? So I mean, I know exactly about the mine,
Mm-hmm.
yours, ours, right? Or even if it's not a blended family, but it's a second marriage, there are nuances that come with those things and planning for blended families, right? You don't want people, like I have adult kids and I don't want them to feel
Mm-hmm.
left out or that they were not loved, something were to happen to myself or their dad. But there are specific ways that we can plan to ensure that they're not beholden to me if something happens to their dad, right? But that they do
Right.
feel loved, right? So we can do planning to ensure that happens and they don't have to come asking me for anything, right? Because we have a
Right.
plan in
Right.
place. Similarly, it's very difficult, first of all, with blended families to even start that conversation. A lot of people find it very, very hard to discuss it. But I want to say to all of those blended families out there, that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. It's okay. Okay to start having those conversations. Get with an attorney that you trust, because that is your trusted advisor who can sit and really counsel you.
Mm-hmm.
Like I tell my clients, I am more than just an attorney, right? I have to counsel my clients,
Right.
right? And sometimes you have, couples who are in a blended family and they come and they haven't had that conversation, but I'm able to talk to them and get them to start the conversation
Right.
together, right? The mine, yours, yours. Let's talk about that, right? We come into marriages, especially when we're older, with assets that we've acquired on our own that we want to keep that way, right? Because especially when we live in a community property state like Texas, right? You want to be some assets that I have acquired prior to my marriage, it's mine. My husband understands that it's
Right.
mine. He has assets that are his, and then we have assets that are
Right.
ours, and that's okay, right? It's not a one size fits all. Every family is different.
And
Every
you can do
family
that. You can
dynamic is
use
different.
your estate plan to like distinguish what those are. You don't need 3 plans. You can build one plan with all that. Awesome.
Correct. Correct.
Awesome. All right. My favorite part of the show, you almost jumped into it, but I love it, is what are 3 things we should do right now? I'm going to get off the screen, so it's all you. Go for it.
All right. The first thing is start an inventory of your assets. Create an inventory, right? That's the first thing. There are $4 billion of assets in the Texas Department of Unclaimed Property, things that have gotten lost because family members did not know this a bank account existed or a life insurance policy existed. So that's the first thing. And while you're creating your inventory, start that hard conversation that we were talking about, right? Start having that conversation. Sit down with your assets. Talk about what's mine, what's yours, what's ours, and what your goals are with estate planning. And then the second thing I would say is get with a professional, right? And feel them out. You want to work with someone who, one, will be able to take your call when you call, will respond to your emails, and who is generally going to be there for your family, right? This is going to be a trusted advisor. So my recommendation is pick up the phone, call that attorney, speak to them on the phone, schedule a meeting with them, go through that process to determine, first of all, if you want to work with this person. Choose someone that suits you and your family, okay? And then finally is get it done. That's it. Just get it done. There are so many attorneys who will tell you that they have, how many clients that started their process and actually never completed it, because a lot of attorneys don't have that system in place to follow up with their clients to make sure that they're following these steps, that they're getting things done. So that's what I would say to you, is just get it done.
Yes, absolutely. And I've got Janice giving you a shout out, saying that it was super easy, that you protected her. Jennifer's also giving you a shout out. I mean, we can totally see just how important it is to have like that extra player in your corner. And I feel like you're just such a team member. Like, you're not just a lawyer, you become part of the family. And in many cases, like when it's time, I mean, they're going to call you and say, hey, like, it's time to modify the trust.
That's what
Or,
I tell
mm-hmm.
clients. I am their client. I'm their lawyer for
uh,
life, and that's them. I'm their lawyer for
That's
life.
awesome. Shalini, so good having you on the show. Love having you back. I can't believe it's been not even a year, right? When did we start this? Like April? And
Yes,
I remember that day, it was just like, well, let's just go live. I don't know, let's just click buttons.
it was tons of fun.
But it's such an honor having you on the air. I'm learning things. I mean, that blows mind blowing. The whole, you can create a trust and it still protects your child from not qualifying or being disqualified from those government programs. We have a lot of teachers, we have a lot of parents, we've got a lot of people in the special needs arena that do want to take care of their family, do want to protect, and they have a lot of the same questions that you answered today about editing, about creating it. But yeah, let's get it done. And so that is on my to-do list, is I'm getting it done. So I'm guilty, and I think that's part of it. I think we should all be a little bit more open. Like, I have a will, but I didn't understand, all those differences: will, trust, like protection, and really.
And the key to the Gabe is
Mhm.
really getting educated. You really have to educate yourself. You have to work with someone who
Right.
is going to educate you, who's going to give you the
Exactly.
know?
Shalini, so good having you on the air. Thank you so much. Come back soon. And then you all to plug your coffee,
Thank
Codispoti with
you.
coffee with Codispoti, because I think a lot of people are going to want to know how to jump onto that.
So I do Coffee with Codispoti every Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. And I answer any of your questions. Send me your questions ahead of time. And I will be happy to answer them. You can send your questions to to client services at codispoti-law.com. And I will answer your questions live.
Perfect.
On
We're
my
going to let
Coffee with Codispoti.
Codispoti, we're going to let you, Shalini, jump on and answer more questions that are on the live chat. We'll put that link on there as well. And we hope you come back soon. Thank you so much for joining us. All right, well, it's going to take you off the air, and there we go, guys. That was Shalini Codispoti, our OG, one of our very, very first to be on the air. We can't thank her enough. I mean, she kind of helped us get into this arena of Expert35. Thank you so much for joining us. Join us later this week on do's and don'ts on social media and how to manage it. We'll see you guys soon.
During difficult times, we collaborate at Expert35. This is for a better tomorrow and a better today. Let's come together, and together we will find a way. You got questions, we got solutions. You got problems, we got resolutions. Visit Expert35.com. No need to worry, just remain calm. No more pain, no more sorrows. We provide solutions for a better tomorrow. No more pain, no more sorrows. We provide solutions for a better tomorrow.